That's cool.
All right, so we've gone live. Hello, Dr. Jay. Welcome back to the Dav Chat broadcast. I'm always playing with titles. So at the moment, it's the Pro-Democracy Variety Hour, even when it doesn't go for an hour. But I'm so excited to have you on today to talk about paradigm shifts and the punditry, because that has been a constant theme of this broadcast anyway, how we as individuals and how those of us who put a lot of thought into things can shape the public discourse, and so shape minds and shape a consensus of goodwill around certain policies and certain political actions. So I just heard from you that you have changed, you've gone into an industry. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I am a historian turned science adjacent. I'm a science writer now. I mean, once a historian, always a historian. But
Yes.
my current work is on pandemic research and response, vector-borne diseases, robotics, many other science-related topics, including something very near and dear important to me, increasing diversity in STEM in order to address health disparities. Lots on my plate, as you can imagine.
So
It's been
much.
a busy time.
Well, I'm so excited for you that you found your way here, because that does sound like a very challenging and timely place to be with all those things. So vector-borne diseases, vector is just a mechanism for transmitting diseases. So say mosquitoes are the vectors for transmitting
Sure,
malaria, and the COVID
mosquitoes.
virus is actually, no, because children are vectors. Okay, so yeah, viral particles probably don't count. Children
Yeah,
count
no,
as
yeah.
and that's been giving you some thoughts about how different paradigm shifts in the punditry class are influencing how the public responds to current events. Been your first epiphany on that topic?
Yeah. I mean, well, for any folks who've been following me prior to our meeting here, I've been talking about paradigm shifts a lot in the last couple of years, and not just in terms of COVID as being kind of a mechanism to usher in this new paradigm, new ways of thinking. Actually, let me just back up real quick. And for those that may not understand this term we're using, paradigm, they may have heard it, but paradigm is just you have one set of expectations, a status quo, and then a paradigm, and that's your paradigm. And then a paradigm shift is where lots of chaos, lots of stuff happens, both good and maybe not so good. And then eventually the chaos builds up. There's kind of a period of transformation, and then you get to the new paradigm and a new
Yep.
status quo. So that's what a paradigm shift is. I consider the pandemic part of the paradigm shift, but we're also layered on top of that. There's a political paradigm shift, and of course that leads to an economic and a cultural one as well. So all these layers
I'm so glad you
interact.
defined it, because that change of expectations, or pairing the
Yeah.
word expectations with paradigm, made me think of it as more than just perspectives. It's expectations. People
Yeah.
invest a lot more emotions in expectations, because then that leads to disappointment or confirmation when their expectations are met. And emotions are much more powerful. Emotions are the things that prompt people to act in any given circumstance. So it's not as mild sounding as we've changed our perspectives. Individuals can change their expectations, but when you have a mass change of expectations, say following the murder of George Floyd, you can have a politically significant collective level of changing expectations that can be supported or influenced by the kind of thought leaders who guide narratives to a degree. People
Mm-hmm.
can sometimes try and guide narratives, but the public might not respond as thoroughly as they hope. I'm thinking about Trump trying to change the paradigm a
Mm-hmm.
few times about COVID. First, to it's a Democratic plot to harm me politically. So if you wear a mask, you're showing that you don't like me, and that was such a powerful anti-public health message.
Yep.
Or it did such a disservice to the American public, particularly people who took Trump's advice as significant. Uh, and he tried to change the paradigm, or to enhance a paradigm shift of viewing a dichotomy between public health or choose the economy, and vote for Trump, choose the economy. When that's
Right.
a false dichotomy, it's a false choice. You have to choose public health in order to support the economy and prevent economic collapse from an out of control pandemic. And I guess as a science and public health writer now, you would know all about that. The travails of trying to bring the public on board with perceiving a pandemic as a threat, and enough to undertake behavioral changes and to support things like mandates, to support policy initiatives from the government.
Yeah. It's so hard. It's so hard. And, I mean, a lot of people are very angry with the CDC, and, there's plenty of reasons for criticism. And also, in addition to
Yes.
that, this is a very difficult, changing dynamic situation where lots of things are happening. I mean, two things that I thought of while you were telling me this is that, paradigms do not exist. Speaking of expectations, do not exist within our necessarily our expectation of how change should occur. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to come on today to talk about punditry, because I think,
Yeah.
As the difference between punditry and being a historian, and sometimes they can be very blurry, especially on Twitter, the line between the two.
Yes.
But is that a pundit will look at a particular situation, and I think maybe consciously, but I think often unconsciously, project whatever the current situation is as a static thing infinitely into the future. This is the way it is right now, and if things are bad, then things are bad infinitely. If things are good infinitely, and things are projected into the future. Whereas with history, we know that there's all these kind of layers and dynamics in play, and they may not conform to our expectations of how change occurs. It may paradigm shifts, in my mind, take years and years to occur, and usually there's the precursors to what leads to the paradigm shift, the chaos, the issues that build up to the point where they become explosive and make change can take decades. So these things don't happen in the course of a political cycle.
I wanted to say something witty about when you started talking about pundits, and say something like, "Oh, pundits are historians with more makeup on," but also more television ready. But I also wanted to say pundits want to make predictions that are confirmed by what happens going forwards.
Right.
Because everybody, and I've reorganized my understanding of Maslow's pyramid. And for people who don't know, first year psych students get introduced to a pyramid of needs, first described in textbooks, at least by somebody called Maslow, who said, yes, you need shelter and your primary physical needs met, shelter and food and warmth. And then you get to the higher level needs of achievement, self-actualization. Love was somewhere in there, probably just above the physical needs getting met, because yes. But I've been reorganizing my understanding of this pyramid to go, people have a very powerful need to be right. And it varies amongst individuals, but people go to extreme lengths to confirm their own ideas and to not be proven wrong or stupid. And I'm thinking now about all the people who are endangering their lives on a daily basis, rather than process or engage with evidence that they should get vaccinated, and that the statistics show much lower rates of hospitalization and death for either 2-dose vaccinated or even more avoidance of hospitalization and death risk, the boosted segment of the population.
Absolutely.
So with pundits, I'm imagining they are strongly motivated by a need to have their projections validated by what happens and to not look wrong or stupid. And in that way, they're probably governed by the psychological maxim, this psychological rule of thumb that says what's past is the best predictor of the future. Or past best predictor of present, i.e. it's hard to shift the status quo. And that rule probably, as you say, governs the thinking of pundits a lot, because it maximizes their chance of being right. If you're going to make projections, if you're going to try and sound like an authority about the future, which is full of factors we can't even necessarily anticipate, and so complicated that even with computer modeling, it's probably as difficult to predict as the climate is, to a degree. You're safe to say, yep, it's going to keep happening. And that also still nullifies your ability to stay on top of trends.
That's right. I mean, historians have this word they like to use a lot, and I'll introduce it here. Is the word
Yeah.
contingency.
Oh,
And contingency in the context of a paradigm shift it matters a lot, because the whole point of a paradigm shift is we don't know what the next status quo is going to be. We're literally shifting to what we knew to something that is new. That hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
So contingency in this particular model is that even little things, little events, can have an enormous impact that you may not even be able to anticipate
Hard to
until
anticipate, yes.
maybe far in the future, like small things. So something like, eat paste instead of take a
Oh, horse
vaccine.
paste.
Yeah, like, it could lead to the deaths of lots of people. On the other hand, also, a small invention, I mean, I bear witness to scientific innovation almost on a daily basis now, can have profound, enormous impact. I think about all those activists in ACT UP, all those during the HIV/AIDS crisis in the 80s, who got nothing but grief from pretty much everybody. Comedians made fun of them left, right, and center, and they worked so hard. And the thing that came out of there, one of the things that came out of their like tireless, thankless work, was do research on protease inhibitors. Now we know, and this is PrEP. This is what's
Yes,
helped us turn the
the
corner.
preventative one that can
Right,
help
right.
suppress
And
HIV
now
from
we
becoming full-blown AIDS.
Yeah. So, and now we know that protease inhibitors have become some of our most powerful weapons against COVID, because essentially it's a mechanism that interrupts viral replication. So, so you can repurpose this thing that came out of this intense activism, that now may help us finally turn around this pandemic that has engulfed the whole world. So you never know, these small things, these small contingent factors can have an enormous impact
That's so
in the
interesting.
future.
I'm going to interrupt you because that's
I
a
was done. Go
scientific.
ahead.
No, oh, good. That's a scientific development that I haven't heard of, and I try to keep my ear reasonably close to the ground of Twitter, which is often you can catch some scientists and med Twitter people there who will tell you what's up. But I hadn't heard of protease inhibitors being a COVID discovery. And the thing that I'm fascinated by right now is that when I look at what anti-vaxxers are saying, there's a Herman McCain Award subthread on Reddit in which they post the Facebook screenshots of people who die, and they post them saying Fauci is Hitler, Biden's Hitler. Well, if masks work, then why this? If vaccines work, then haha, gotcha. And then with the updates of their sickness and death, and they blur out their names and their faces for a degree of privacy, but it's a fascinating insight into how repetitive the memes that they're all sharing on Facebook, and they're often just grasping at very contrarian things. So yes, ivermectin, you can repurpose anti-parasitic drugs for COVID treatment. So they want there to be a simple answer. They want COVID to be like 10 easy tricks of getting toothpaste to repair your iPhone screen. They want it to be easy, and they want it to be anti-establishment. So how ironic that a lot of these people are often quite Christian nationalist, white Christian nationalist, and often homophobic and racist
I see where you're
as
going.
well. And that a development that's arisen from the work of AIDS activists who were doing it on behalf of the gay community that was being primarily victimized initially by AIDS, and benefiting from that will be interesting if that's saving their lives when they've been so anti-establishment about every development so far. So I'm imagining they'll continue to be anti-establishment actually about protease inhibitors as well, if they turn out to be this amazing development, which you're saying they are, and you're the science
already
communicator.
already out there in the field already.
Are they associated with some drugs, and I just haven't realized that it's protease? Oh, is it Paxlovid?
Paxlovid is one of them. There's more coming online. There's also different other inhibitors, polymerase inhibitors, like molnupiravir is out there, and there's more coming online.
Molnupiravir, yes. How do we?
and the irony is that these folks who won't get vaccinated, they're the ones that eventually, when we we're trying to ramp up production, we being humans are trying to ramp up production of these drugs, they'll be the ones that get them, because if you're not vaxxed, you may not need, you're statistically less likely to need them.
Their risk profile renders
Yes.
them more likely to need these drugs that are made possible through the work of homosexual activists fighting to protect the gay community initially in the 1980s. Irony. I have noted they often seem to go to hospital in a late fashion, as in there's late admission sometimes of their condition. If they admitted COVID was a problem, they might get medical treatment earlier, but they're staying home and taking either human ivermectin tablets, which you should reserve for people who have lupus or actually no, I think I'm messing up my drugs now, so I'm going to pause.
Yeah, I'm not sure about
hydroxychloroquine is the one that the anti-vaxxers should leave for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. But that's the hydroxychloroquine. The ivermectin for treating parasites, and that's what helped kept me. I'm like, you don't treat lupus for parasites. That's different. Okay, hydroxychloroquine, stop taking it. Let the lupus patients have it. Ivermectin. Oh, darling, the door. Thank you, sweetie.
I wanted to, if I may, and I hope this isn't inappropriate, I wanted to talk about paradigm shifts in a slightly different context, and also to tell to your audience.
Yeah, it was my son just said to install this phone, so I wasn't sure if you guys had one or not.
We've got some guests. I wanted to talk about paradigm shifts in a slightly different context, and also tell your audience about something else that's really important to me that I'm working on. Exciting project that's also very much related to this current moment. So just like now, just like in 2022, we're in this paradigm shift and we don't know where things are going to go. Pundits will try, as we've just discussed. We'll try to chart things out, but it really is not clear where we're going to land, because even small things can have these enormous impacts. Well, just like 2022, 1940 is another year I consider to be kind of a paradigm shift year. And I'm working on this project. It's a passion project of mine. It's in honor of my father, who passed away at the very beginning of the pandemic. He was an actor and producer for 50 years. And I founded a production company called Elusive Films to honor him, and to take my history research and put it on screen. And it's about the year of 1940 and how America may have felt a fascism then. It really wasn't clear. I mean, you're talking about, having the American perspective, right? The American perspective is that America won World War II. We're the good guys. We're just kind of inundated with this narrative. But and
you come back to that fork in the road and going, it was a bifurcated path.
Yeah, it really wasn't. Yeah, it really wasn't clear how things were going to go. And I came across, during my dissertation research, I came across this incredible story of this Nazi spy who came to New York City in 1940 to try to recruit Wall Street, essentially, to serve Nazi causes. And it seemed like he was going to be successful. And pretty much the only guy that was standing in his way was a Jewish FBI agent who was tracking this guy down. All true story, true crime, film noir story. I call it A Nazi on Wall Street, and my company Elusive Films is going to produce it. We want to pitch it as a mini series, and we've launched a podcast to talk about related historical issues with award-winning historians. Oh no.
The guest is somebody coming to help fix the incinerator. This is a new thing for me in America, that we now have an incinerator. I'm not used to it, and I think it's probably my fault that a spoon got in it, and then I know this because the spoon shot out of it rapidly. Anyway, then it made bad sounds. Somebody's come to install a
garbage
new
disposal.
Courtesy of our landlord. Thank you, landlord. I don't even really want one, but I guess it's part of the continuity of the property. Have one. I'd rather just not put shit down the sink. But anyway.
Right. Anyway, so we're launching this. I've been working on this project for 2 years. to honor my dad, who was an actor and a producer. His best friend, Keir Delay, who is the famous actor from 2001: Space Odyssey, he's going to play Henry Ford in it. And so we basically want to shoot like a short film teaser to bring to film festivals to get picked up for this project. And so we've made a podcast to kind of advance our audience.
What's your podcast called?
It's called A Nazi on Wall Street.
Oh, Nazi on Wall Street.
You can find all of this at elusive-films.com. And
ELUSIVE.
Yes, correct. We're hosting a fundraiser for our short films. Are not cheap; they're very expensive to make, even short ones. And so, if people, it is really important for me to show Americans and beyond and the world that it really wasn't clear which way America was going to go: fascism or democracy. And we're kind of at that point again. And so I see this as a really important story to tell.
It's not a microcosm, it's an echo. It's a preceding echo of something that happened because of the dynamics in America at the time. And a lot of historians recently have been trying to draw more attention to the fact that American eugenicist scientists gave a lot of inspiration to Nazi politicians.
That's correct.
And so there's an appetite there. People's appetite has been at least whetted with some of these ideas, and some of the pictures of the rallies, black and white pictures of the Nazi rallies, fascist rallies held in New York.
That's right. Well, that was the very big one that everybody remembers is the right before
Madison.
Our story begins. Yeah, Madison Square Garden in 1939. And that's kind of when the FBI was already kind of working on this, but that was really when the FBI was like, we need to deal with this Nazi problem in the United States. Nazis everywhere. There's spies from Germany all over the place. And so this Jewish FBI agent becomes the leader of the New York office to hunt down, and then finds out there's this Nazi spy there who's working, trying to recruit American business leaders and Wall Street executives. And I want to tell that story. I want to shoot a short film version of it. We're raising money next month to do that.
What's the date?
The date of the fundraiser?
Yeah.
TBD.
Okay.
Jenny, you can donate now if you'd like. You could be a first donor ahead of time.
I can put a banner up on the screen. Hang on.
Yeah, please. It's here. There's a link. Can I put the link in the chat here?
Yeah, you could probably do that.
elusivefilms.com /donate.
You've put it in a private chat, so I'm going to put it on a banner on the screen.
Yeah. And if people want to learn more about the project, all the things I've said, our hero FBI agent is operating out of a very real secret base that was in the 30 Rock building, anti-Nazi secret base to hunt down Nazis. This is something that's never been portrayed on TV or film before, and we want to show it. So we want to shoot a short film teaser, raise some money to do that, and then.
Well, now I want to do another video with you in which we don't do any of the chat that we did at the beginning, and it's more just concentrated. And I'll tag Adam Scott in it because I'm guessing he's Jewish because he follows me, and he only follows 1,000 people. So you already have connections through people who've worked with your dad, but more people having their attention drawn to your project is always better. So I'm thinking we'll do this again and do a briefer, more condensed one.
Sure.
But this is good for now. People who've joined us to hear about it, because this is a good project and it's such an important thing for America to wrestle with. The very real dynamics of its past, because guess what? We're still here and we're still reckoning with the fallout from America's occasional failure to look at domestic terrorism elements. January the 6th in part happened the way it did because of people underestimating the threats posed by white people who are irrationally and illogically angry about things. Things been stolen from our white demigod dude. What do we call him? The orange Cheeto,
the orange dictator. People have asked me many times why I don't do a documentary while this is why I'm choosing to do a drama. And that's because, so many people are stressed out and unsettled right now. And I want people to understand that there were other times in history when we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know that America was going to make the right choice in 1940. And the same goes for the year of our Lord, or whatever you believe, in 2022, that, it's, we all are these characters in this story, and we don't know where it's going. So yeah, yes, as you said, I want people to kind of wrestle with that and understand that, and that, at least in the 1940 story, we know, because of hindsight, that people did make the right choice, that the Nazis were defeated.
Yeah, conscience and decency won over the intoxication of fascism, which is that ability to spiral into what Freud would probably describe as thanatos, like a longing for death, or to destroy things rather than build them, because you've identified enemies, and those enemies are so nebulous that they're effectively everywhere. You just need to wreck everything. So Jews, communists, they're all out to get you. You just got to start pulling things down, and you're with a gang of people, and that it sounds quite sexist to call it male energy, but it's the dark side of what I guess the dark side of what we sometimes ask of men. And we sometimes ask men to exercise violence to protect the group. And the dark side of us legitimizing violent impulses for our protection is that sometimes violent impulses spiral out of control into a zest for destruction and violence and hurting others, filled with the moral glee or the moral clarity of, oh, we're doing the right thing. We're getting the people who need to be gotten, those dastardly, whichever stigmatized minority group where we've been incentivized to hate at the moment. And I say incentivized, and that's a good word to imply to Trump. Trumpism incentivized people to hate in concert.
And this relates to the other than paradigm shifts, the other concept that I talk endlessly about, if people have heard of me before or will hear it now, is populism. Is the other concept, that I discuss a lot, because that, to me, that crystallizes this anger and the need to create enemies, and the kind of projecting our emotional internal world onto the external current events that are happening. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about punditry again, because I think punditry kind of creates this kind of multiplier effect. It enhances, it's a lightning rod for populist sentiment. And I think we're so saturated with populist anger all the time. It knows no ideological loyalty. You can have left-wing populism, right-wing populism. It's to me, it's kind of antithetical to progressivism, because it's not rational. It's not fact-finding. It's not coalition building.
It's pandering to the need to find an explanation and to vent an emotion.
Yeah,
and
it's
to be
not
right
utopian.
about things.
Excuse me, it is utopian. It's not, it's not
it's not pragmatic. It works
pragmatic,
with ideals and unidealized. Yes.
Yeah. So it's super frustrating to see pundits taking advantage of populist anger, and of course, why wouldn't? That's the problem, is why wouldn't they? Because they get money and social power from it.
Yes.
But it's just we've done this so much that now it's brought us to this crisis. I mean, populism. You hit the nail on the head earlier. You said, people would basically rather die than be wrong, right? They would rather die than take a vaccine, because that, to me, that's kind of this byproduct of populism, is people have now built this world of grievance around them that's impenetrable to any kind of factual analysis or rational response, and we, of course, we all have feelings, we all have emotions, but then what we choose to do with them, that we have agency over that part.
Yes.
And what people tweet and what people put out into the world constantly tells me that people don't have control. They don't feel, they are not choosing. They're making a choice, but they're not choosing to kind of separate, try to
They
at
have
least
so much
try to
grievance, they're
sit with
easily
that.
manipulated
It's
into a
so
story, and then
frustrating.
every detail they encounter is just readily hung on a narrative hook to build into a story so that they can interpret as, I was right all along, the people I trusted were being truthful. Everything is interpreted in the light of an original story they were fed by a con artist, which is why having a charismatic, widely admired populist like Trump is a galvanizing factor for fascism, even
dangerous.
if the fascist elements already existed. And I think obviously a lot of the things that are problematic now pre-existed and predated Trump, but he's been a galvanizing rod for the audacity of lying, the audacity of working on people's emotions, taking that agency away from them by being such a powerful storyteller and using repetition, using those fascist techniques of almost mass hypnosis or mass delusion to say, so that people are so worked up now, they're turning on typically revered authority figures, the amount of hostility that's apparently manifesting towards doctors and hospitals, to say, oh, we villainize, or anti-vaxxers have villainized them, so that they're like, you're giving me remdesivir, or you're following this protocol. You're being given an incentive by insurance companies to kill people. You get a 20% death bonus. These wild accusations that are coming very readily to people because they've been set on a path of villainizing people by Trump, and he legitimized that and he emboldened them to do that. So
outrage is addictive. Outrage is addictive, and that's the problem with social media, and and not only is outrage addictive, but attitudes are viral. We read each other and pick up on each other's attitudes, and those have real health consequences for good or ill. And
the contagion of emotion, because we'll be happy to be complacent in a status quo. And people used to complain about Americans being too complacent, and now we're like, no, let's complain about Americans being deluded, because they're being very active in what they're doing and the choices they're making, but a lot of it's fueled by delusion, whether that be far left delusion that Joe Biden could somehow just magically disappear, or student debt, which he couldn't do without being challenged by the Supreme Court. He couldn't even mandate vaccines for all businesses. It was struck down by the Trump-stacked Supreme Court. And a delusion that the Senate is functional when the Senate is not functional. You can't just say Democrats have 50 senators, therefore they can do anything they want. No. The most critical bit of ignorance I think most Americans have at the moment is not knowing that filibuster exists, and that essentially you have to get 60 votes to pass nearly all legislation, that there's a couple of loopholes you can pass one thing. What is it? One thing a year through reconciliation.
Yeah.
And I mean, I need to get these details down more clearly, because I'm
It's
a big
arcane.
believer in
It's complicated.
it's okay, it's complicated, it's not particularly interesting. But it's like, that's why you have to bring history into it. And that's why I like your project, because it's using lateral thinking, because people can have all those preformed ideas and loyalties that make them struggle to engage with the facts on the ground as they are. But when you present them with historical circumstances that they don't have any preconceived loyalties about necessarily, or they're shaken up a little bit. It's like electric shock therapy. Let's mix up the dynamics of your preconceptions and go, how about this story, and take them on some emotional roller coaster of a drama with resolution. But they know it's anchored in history and it's anchored in fact. It's just the facts haven't been disputed on Donald Trump's Twitter account every day, and people haven't been repeatedly told, no, these people are lying, the FBI is lying. You have the hope of engaging people on a more fresh basis, or at least winning over more of middle America. I want more of middle America to know these things, to know that the seeds of Nazism were baked into America's susceptibility to race-based arguments, to hierarchical meritocracies of race, the way you go, no, white people are just inherently superior. And eugenics was giving people a veneer to back that up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's in America's DNA. Yeah, it struck me. What you're saying about, kind of taking people out of this present moment,
Mm.
giving them a story. History, the function of history, the utility of history is very debatable. But the power of storytelling is something that's kind of really primal and really deep, very deep within humanity. It's something kind of hardwired within us. So, if we can use that to help people understand and navigate this moment, because there are lots of contradictions. It's like, it's not like the student loan system doesn't need fixing. It's just
Yeah.
that the populist like kind of gut anger approach to it, that's not going to sit and look at the 1965 statute and question whether or not that's actually a solid basis to wipe away student loans, is where it gets interrupted. So we can show that real populism, that real anger on the street in some other completely different context where there's this big paradigm shift moment and things could go either way. And
Yeah.
I want to show people that march on Madison Square Garden. I want to show people, the few folks who were trying to stand up to this, and the bonus is that it's true crime, it's film noir, it's what people, it's things that people really enjoy, and there's so many of these stories that are absolutely true, and just to me, I'm flabbergasted every day that they haven't been already
Yeah,
told
because they're
and
good
put in the
stories.
public conscious. So A Nazi on Wall Street is meant to kind of to be a vehicle for that, to help people understand this moment.
I like that you want to harness the power of storytelling, because it resonates with us at a primal level. It doesn't just confirm our ideas. It doesn't just send us away with a box ticked of, we were right all along, Nazis are good, Nazis are bad, Americans are good. It prompts you to challenge you. Are we always good? Is there something we actually have to gird our loins to fight against at a domestic level, or not even to use a word like fight, but to counter? We have to counter these tendencies and find ways to do these things. What was I going to say? Primal storytelling. Oh, that ultimately we're protected by people's consciences. You wanted to highlight these real the actors, but the actors in this real life story who made decisions of conscience.
They made a choice. I mean, that's the other kind of issue with one of many issues with the way the U.S. kind of understands its own history is, this hero worship. One person can do it. It's very much part of the populist DNA of this country. But it takes everybody to come together and do their part and make the right choice to shift the paradigm and to a place that's better than the one that came before.
And even if it's not everybody, a critical mass of people.
It doesn't need everybody. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of that was one of the lines that really struck me in Biden's inauguration speech. He's just like, if enough people care, then we can do anything to improve the lives of everyone. And so that's kind of what I want to show. I mean, I think the last time we talked, I might have told a story about the guy who escaped Auschwitz, and how I use that as a vehicle to talk about my perspective on hope being an act of will, not something that we a calculation based on current events. It has nothing to do with that.
Not to trivialize the Holocaust, but I'm using that on my diet. Hope is an act of will.
Yeah,
I choose to believe that this time I can increase my vegetable intake or whatever, and my daily step count. And that belief in itself is a predictive factor in my success, because I choose to believe that I make it true through an act of will. But yes, he chose to believe that he could survive Auschwitz. And that wasn't a guarantee that he would survive, but he understood it as being a factor in his survival, that if he didn't choose hope, then he would have no chance. But that his one act of agency was to start with a basis of hope and proceed from there, and that would direct his actions in a positive way that would hopefully get him out. And it did work. It wasn't a guarantee. Hope is not a guarantee. Hope is an increasing, not your risk profile. What's the opposite word to risk profile?
You decrease your risk profile.
You decrease your risk profile and enhance your success profile.
Exactly. I mean, this is what frustrates me so much about pundits, especially on Twitter. People who have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people followers, listening to what they're saying, and they'll say something like, well, there's no hope, about something like that. We're screwed. And I always want to, my response is always like, then why are you even tweeting? Because it's
Well,
not,
you know why,
it's
Jay,
not
you know
about
why.
that. It's not really, because what they're really doing, this is kind of the populist mechanism. What they're really doing is they're validating their own personal emotions at the expense of everyone who's listening. That's what they're actually doing, because
and
it's
more
not
than that. More than that, Jay, validating their emotions, but they're also getting to be mini pundits. They're legitimizing their own ambition. Everybody who talks on Twitter, who speaks, who opens their Twitter mouth, is an aspirational pundit who wants to be validated, who wants
included,
to be able to go.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Me too. Look at me being a little mini pundit with you right now. Who wants to be able to be validated, to go back in time and say, "See, I was right." We often have a 50-50 chance of being right, particularly if we're being negative, then maybe more, because the best predictor of future is past. But it doesn't mean that we're guaranteed to be right. And really, when you're contributing to a self-fulfilling prophecy of doom and gloom, that it's kind of time to shut your Twitter mouth down. And a lot of people would benefit from knowing that. But at the same time, that's how they tick their daily boxes of self-affirmation as a person with important opinions. That's how they're validating themselves enough to get to, that's their morning coffee. The rest of us who are brought down by that just have to learn to emotionally distance ourselves from people being negative, because it's not representative of the public as a whole. The people who go on Twitter and comment are people who fancy their own opinions.
Sure. I mean, the only constant in our lives is change. So whatever is happening right now is absolutely 100% likely to change in the future. Will you be alive to see it? Maybe not. Maybe things will change for the better for someone else and not you, but things are going to change for the better, just as they're likely to change for the worst some other time. And so for anyone to say everything is screwed right now is just, to me, fundamentally false, and B, like not helpful or useful. I wrote a short piece a while ago that I'm just thinking of now. It's called do you have it was on Medium. It's called something like, do you have control over yourself on social media? And what I told people is, there's absolutely nothing wrong with telling people, I feel scared, I feel angry, I feel hurt, I feel sad. When you say you should feel sad, you should feel angry, then you're taking away the listener's agency to make their own choice about how they're feeling, or even
using
feel
the power
whatever
of storytelling to feel bad. You're becoming the narrator in a doom and gloom story, just so you can say, I was a good narrator, I was an accurate narrator.
Right. And so
who died and made you the narrator? Oh, Jack Dorsey made you the narrator because he gave you Twitter.
Right. And things may be bad. Things are not, there's lots of things that are really troubling and really worrisome. And I'm even, qualifying my language here. You could use a lot of other adjectives. What happened yesterday with the Senate, as predicted, was bad. But I think that where there's life, there's hope, and there's always more to do. Even if worst case things happen, a civil war, well, then what happens? What's the outcome of that civil war? We don't know. Maybe the side that cares about democracy wins that civil war and creates an even better democracy. So you don't know what's going to happen. And for people to just say, you're screwed, that's it. And to me, it's beyond useless for people. It's actively harmful.
We need to no, I'm not going to allow those people to be the biggest problem, because they're small. It's small, the smallness of people who are finding ways to exercise their own angst or to gain empowerment through at least being the narrator. You feel better when you can describe a story. And you're saying, hey, just describe your emotions. That would be great. But no, they want to describe the story. They want to make pronouncements. They feel more in control when they do that, because being cynical about what's going to happen gives them at least a measure of control, because they're not going to get hurt by disappointment. So it's emotionally protective, what they're doing.
Yeah.
But
you can tell.
the good thing. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt your point.
Oh, I was going to just say the good side of what Chuck Schumer did by bringing it to a vote is that he's outed Cinema and Manchin as
Yep.
being the two people that need to be pressured, because before there was a narrative of, well, what if there's lots of Democrats in the Senate who don't support suspending this filibuster for a bit in order to support voting rights. So that has evaporated. That's the good side. That's the upside to, yes, and there often is. And when you think about civil rights in America and how long and drawn out that process was, or even suffrage for women for voting as well, how there are lots of losses on a slope to victory.
Exactly.
Exactly. So I appreciate you writing a piece about how those people should stop. I don't think they're going to take your advice, because but what does stop people from acting like that? When you make fun of them sometimes, when you make it into a caricature of how to behave, like Debbie Downer.
You can't. That's the thing. I could be frustrated, but I can't make anyone else's choices for them. I can't control other people. What I can do is control myself. And one way you can do that is you can use storytelling to model different behavior.
Yes, model different behavior. That's what you do for children as well, when you want them to stop acting.
Exactly. You can model decency. I used a story about how my mom became a Trump person, disowned me.
Yes.
And
didn't come to your wedding.
She blocked me. She cut me off. She didn't come to my PhD graduation, didn't come to my wedding, sent me back all the gifts and belongings I ever gave her with no note, and hasn't spoken to me since. It's been 4 years now.
Wow.
More than 5, almost 5 years. And so, but what I did at the end of that piece, was that I said, you know what, Mom, like, you can still come back from this. Come back to your senses. Come back to the world of
You
decency.
left the door open for her.
I was leaving the door open, and I did that on purpose, because what I was trying to do is model decency, that we don't have to just, because it's easy. I mean, this is a person who raised me. It's easy for me to just condemn and shut the door, block. I do it every day on Twitter, because there are people that just, I don't need to hear another "we're screwed" message. But what I want, and maybe this is hypocritical. We're all hypocrites to some extent. But what I'm trying to do on a large scale here with this story is tell people, look, we can still, for our family and the people we care about, and people we think there's still hope for, we can model that decency. We can keep the door open and say, hey, you can come back. And there's still more, while there's life, there's still more chances to do something different, to make a different choice. And even if, even for the people I blocked, I've unblocked people. So you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like we can we can't make choices for other people, but we can model a different way to be.
I'm sorry that
it's okay.
Loud. But people who have to fix incinerators probably get used to raising their voice over the sound of an incinerator.
Yeah.
And he's giving my husband probably important advice about how not to ruin the incinerator next time. I don't know if I ruined it, but there was, correlation's not the same as causation, but there was a spoon that briefly was in the incinerator. It popped out so quickly.
I destroyed a shot glass in my garbage disposal. So,
the spoon was fine. I just want to say that spoon was.
I had to learn to fix one myself.
So you destroyed the shot glass and the incinerator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you gotta take it apart, clean it out, and put it back together.
We didn't do that. Maybe next time. I'm looking at the comments, and I want to say that Pompeius Magnus, which is a very exciting Latin-y name. I remember you from before. He's been a commentator for a few years. Can you see them, Jay? He says, on the issue of political hope, he's not feeling super hopeful because of all of the millions who voted for Trump, despite his intentionally disastrous handling of the pandemic. Well, don't think of it as they were voting for a failed pandemic response. They were voting for a reality that had been narrated to them, that the pandemic wasn't real, and that they had to vote to save America from a disastrous response to a fabricated pandemic. They were voting for a future in which the pandemic wasn't real and the clouds would be lifted from everybody's eyes. The pandemic would magically end with the election because the Democrats would stop trying to damage President Trump by pretending that COVID was a problem. So, look, that reality didn't work out for them. But because of people's innate reluctance to admit when they've been conned, people who voted for him are quite possibly still defending them. Although I have heard anecdotal stories on social media, specifically Twitter, of some people's neighbors taking down some of their Trump 2020 flags. My own Trumpy neighbor, let me see if I can see his truck. I think he has less. I know he's parked with his butt towards the garage today. So, but I feel like there's less Trump stickers than there were. There used to be these "Make Liberals Cry Again" stickers on his truck back. And I was like, oh, because I've just moved here and you're trying to be all friendly and nice to me. I'm white, so that's probably quite easy for you to do. I didn't say that. But I said, you're being friendly to me, but your bumper stickers aren't very friendly. Saying "Make Liberals Cry Again" is not very friendly. I'm liberal. I'm liberally minded. Are you going to keep that sticker on your truck? And he took it off. Not that day, but he took it off like a week later and replaced it with something negative about Joe Biden. How's that vote for Brandon? No, how's that vote for Biden working out for you? Gas up 9%, something up something percent, which is not surprising. He hasn't changed his political affinities. He just changed a little bit about how he was going to express that. So anyway, my point was just some Trump supporters may have felt a diminution of their sympathy. And that's always been the purpose of storytellers like me and you, who engage with people on Twitter and try to say the truth matters, even though psychologists often say the truth doesn't matter to people who are entrenched in a point of view.
Sure.
But experience in life should teach us it's not just the extremists who say their opinion out loud that we're trying to reach. It's the quiet people in the middle.
I mean, we have a hard time conceptualizing change, and it's so much easier to take a snapshot, and we all do it. I think we're hardwired to do it because we've been hunter gatherers much longer than we've been, quote unquote civilized people, where it's like, I know that this field, I have a spatial and informational awareness of this field down a mile from here northwest, as the wind blows, has this particular food that I know is going to help me. Well, it's the same thing with like the 74 million Americans. Well, we have the snapshot of 74 million American Trump supporters, but what in reality what's actually happening is many people are becoming voters. Many people are ceasing to become voters. Many people who voted may not vote in the future. Many people who did not vote may vote in the future.
Have you heard of that statistical suggestion that a lot of Trump voters are dying? Although not everybody who gets COVID dies.
There's actual pretty deep quantitative studies on this now, and it's not the thing that also matters is it's not just like rank and file red voters in the reddest counties. It's actual like personality influencers, if you will, yes, for modern parlance, who are dying. I mean, I also see these threads on Twitter of like, we've lost, Republican Trumpist state senators, radio hosts, prominent writers and bloggers. These are people who influence lots of people. They're gone now. They're not on the stage anymore. The people who survived, who got boosted, are still on the stage. So that has, on top of everything else that's happening in this paradigm shift, I think that's a massive understated thing. I think historians in the future, provided we survive, a century from now, I think we'll look at the pandemic as a key influencer of political events in this particular time. And I think for good. One of the things I want to talk about. So my podcast is finished its first season. It's called The Nazi on Wall Street. The second season, I want to talk to some medieval historians. Why do I want to do that? When I'm doing a story about the 1940s and talking about related issues, I want to do that because I think there's a lot of there's kind of this narrative out there that the plagues of the medieval eras actually helped expand political rights for people who are serfs and peasants, because it increased the value of their labor. It increased the importance of cities. It increased, it allowed for
I
the
need that
growth and
today.
expansion of guilds.
Here,
Now, I'm
nice to
not a
meet you, Peter. Have a great
medievalist,
rest of your
so
day.
I
If
think
there's any issues,
that
obviously, just give us a ring. Yeah, no worries.
thank you.
Have a great rest of your day. You too.
But anyway, I think
So
that
plagues
there's
helped expand.
similar.
Let me go back because some of it was hard to hear. So plagues may have helped expand rights for the peasants because their labor became more valuable because their ranks were thinned.
Yeah.
Okay. So
and you could escape serfdom much more easily. It's like it's this chaotic, horrible situation. People are dropping like flies. You and countless generations are tied to a piece of land. There's a city nearby. Flee and go there. I'm pretty sure that happened. To what extent and how much of this narrative is complicated by historical scholarship, I think is a conversation that needs to be had. But I have a feeling there's also, in addition, some truth to that. So, I feel like we can kind of contextualize that in our current moment.
And even if it's hard to quantify the extent to which any of this is true, there's sometimes just narratives that are ready to resonate with people, that people are ready to hear and go, yes, now is the time for me. I mean, initially people were calling it the Great Resignation, and now they're calling it the Great Shift. People are leaving some jobs and going to others if they have the freedom to do that. So that's not specifically for serfs, because some people are stuck particularly in various American communities where there's a lot of disadvantage. But I have room for that story, that social mobility may have been enhanced by plagues.
Right. So
I'm interested in that.
Yeah. So to kind of tie this all together, because I do have to go and do some more science writing very shortly, is that that we don't. Paradigm shifts are kind of complicated, confusing things, and I think it's folly for any of us to kind of guess where this might go. We're going to do it anyway, of course, but it's really hard to guess where this is going to go. And when we know, I think we know we're in a paradigm shift. We know that much. And we've hit some very important turning points already, and there's going to be multiple ones. The election of 2020 being one of them, the emergence of COVID being another, and probably the midterm elections here, and then the at least for the U.S. and the U.S. has such an outsized effect on the rest of the world, and then the elections of 2024. So I feel like where the pandemic goes, what happens in the midterms, and then there's also, as we talked about only very briefly, some pretty major scientific innovations that are kind of waiting in the wings.
Protease inhibitors like
Paxlovid is Pfizer's drug. There's going to be more of them out there. I guarantee it. And not just that, but just the organization of science and the acceleration of innovation has just been massive in this time. So that COVID is already kind of it's forced us to look more deeply into health disparities, to look at chronic disease like long COVID, which has shed light on other under recognized, underappreciated, understudied other chronic disease like Lyme disease. So I feel like there's a lot that these small contingent factors that may have these outsized effects on what we're going to see next. So I'm suspicious of anyone who's going to tell me things are going to be horrible in 2 years or great. I think there's still a lot more of this particular moment for us to digest. And again, we can choose what we do with our emotions. We can feel them, but we can choose to empower each other instead of cut each other down when we all need as much support as we can get.
Lovely. That's a lovely concluding sentiment, Jay. I will release you to go and do some of your actual work on science communication. And I'll thank you for joining me today and telling that story. The link down the bottom is the link. I'll describe it for anybody who's joined us more recently, to donate to a passion project that Jay is working on with regards to a true story to make into a short film, with the idea of then hooking more people to finance a bigger film. So the short film.
Miniseries. Yeah.
A miniseries.
Yeah.
Miniseries. featuring a real life Nazi spy who infiltrated, was it the FBI?
No,
Infiltrated.
it's tried a real life Nazi spy tried to recruit Wall Street, and only a Jewish FBI agent and his small team
In the
can
FBI.
stop them. True story. You can read about it also. Same link, elusivefilms.com/about. If you want to learn more about it, learn more about my dad, who recently passed. This project's to honor him. I thank you so much. It's been always a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you too. I'm so glad you reached out to chat with me today, and I'll have to get on board. I'm very behind because I haven't listened to your podcast yet, which is also called A Nazi on Wall Street. And
Correct.
now I didn't have the attention span. My attention span was being very digitized by the events of the last 4 years. So I could like read tweets or tweet threads, but I actually listened to a couple of podcasts over the last few days, like all the way through, which is a big deal for me. And I've been reading a book, which is very difficult for me to do as well. Having children started with dismantling my ability to read in a sustained way, and Trump and the fascist generation helped with that. But I'm getting it back. I'm reading a book called Dying of Whiteness by Dr. I want to say Dr. Jay, but it's not Jay. It's Dr. Jonathan Metzl. That's the author, Dr. Jonathan Metzl. But that's a whole separate thing. I'm going to make a list of the next podcast to listen to, The Nazi on Wall Street. The Nazi or A Nazi? I need to get
A Nazi on Wall Street. And let's we're launching our fundraiser next month for our short film teaser, and we'll have to talk about this again. I'll come on again.
Yes,
I'll give you a lot more
detail.
detail.
Very concentrated, because today we expanded. We went all over the shop. Not to say that was a waste. That was a lovely discursive stroll into causes and theories and explanations and suppositions about things. But yes, we'll do a concentrated blab on the project, the donation evening. What's it called?
Fundraiser
Kickstarter. And we'll do that in a shortened time frame so that I can tag people in it and say, please, for your attention.
Thank you again. It's been a pleasure. We'll talk again soon. Thanks to everybody who's listening. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, that was lovely. Lovely to talk to Dr. Jay. I'll take the banner off from the screen because I think we've seen that, and I'm so excited that we had that conversation, and it's going to spur lots of other conversations, I think, that I will have with myself or that I'll have with any other guests who come on the show. I love having guests. I love having another mind to riff off and to engage with. And something I was thinking about while talking to Dr. Jay was a reconsideration of that Maslow hierarchy of need and how we want so much to be right. And maybe we all need to stop expecting that we'll know what will happen, and to be satisfied with our own work in contributing to the kind of world we want, and our own work in pushing forward with manifesting goodness in not just in our own lives, in more broadly speaking, in the life of the country, but not just trying to anticipate what is happening. So in a way, being satisfied to be less clever, and being satisfied with expecting our experts not to be right as well. We can't just go, okay, I'll be calm if somebody tells me everything's going to be okay. Oh, wait, now they were wrong, so I hate them. That's a cycle of endless expectation raising and then disappointment. We can't just relate to our environment in that way. We have to get comfortable with a degree of uncertainty and comfortable with a degree of contentness in our own efforts, to be satisfied by what we can do ourselves. And the knowledge that things can be a self-fulfilling prophecy if you work towards what you want, and you are content with your values, and you find some people who share those values. So the internet kind of makes that easy. But maybe we could help the internet make it more explicit for people to hook up with people who have common values, so that we can again find contentment in our daily efforts to move the future forward in a positive direction, rather than just expecting so much from ourselves and others to be able to just predict the future, as if there's this fatalistic, it's going to happen, we just have to understand it. No, it's not just going to happen. We can influence it ourselves. And particularly, we can feel encouraged in our efforts to influence the future in a good direction if we feel united with like-minded others. And that was definitely one of the attractions of fascism through human history and modern American fascism under Trump, that idea of unifying people through the moral clarity of incentivized hate. Incentivized because the incentive, the reward for hating minority groups or hating migrants is the unity of doing something together. So this is what attracts often disaffected people to join neo-Nazi groups or white supremacist groups, people who are trying to rehabilitate themselves and help other people emerge from white supremacist gangs or groups. They often say, yes, I was young and I was angry and I didn't have a strong sense of myself. And so I was more readily recruited by white supremacists who gave me worth and meaning through adopting the shared values and shared activities and shared aspirations of a white supremacist movement. So what can be done about that? I guess it helps to describe it. It helps sometimes to inoculate yourself from something if you know what the attraction is, and you can tell your children, not just don't do drugs, but don't do drugs, people will promise you a good time. But if you look at the lives of people who've been hooked on drugs for years, it's not the kind of cycle you want in your own life. It often involves a lot of theft, poor moral choices, and hurting people around you. So that's what a parent might say to a child. But the main thing a parent will do to inoculate their child against the risk of taking drugs is cherishing the children and giving them a strong sense of self, in that you express love of who they are and you show them that you see them and you value them for their specific, unique qualities, whilst also helping them accept themselves as imperfect creatures who may have deficits that turn out to be strengths, depending on your perspective. Just to accept the complexities of life and the complexities of their own natures, and not to be susceptible to the simplistic outreach programs of Nazis. Oh, I've clicked away from the comment section, so I need to go back and see. Pompeius Magnus has made a comment before about plagues, and Bob made a comment about his brother, which I will read. When Jay and I were talking about leaving the door open for relatives who are either you have alienated or who have alienated themselves from you over political differences or moral differences. Because some people say choosing to support Trump is not just a political choice, it's a divergence of values and morals that I can't personally tolerate or be an enabler to by continuing to have some kind of social connection to you. So I have to entirely cut off that relationship for now until you have finished being a Trump supporter. Bob says, I left the door open for my brother, but he died from COVID before he could see his mistake following Trump. And that's the finality of death, although not the finality of the imagination. So I wonder if it would bring any satisfaction on some level, Bob, to imagine your brother reading a news story with you and going, oh, wow, 7 forged certificates to certify election results for Trump in a faked way. Wow, maybe that would have been a detail that helped him. When people are sunk in a certain perspective, oh, the computer's really wobbling. It might be hard for them to have any revelation or any detail break through their cult-like enclosed thinking. But what if you could imagine your brother learnt about it or was in some way looking down on us and going, oh, wow, that that dude actually is a bit of a con artist. How embarrassing. I didn't see it, and it cost me my life. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I chose Trump over my own brother. Pompeius Magnus made a comment saying plagues expanding political and economic rights after 1348. That's the historical consensus due to labor shortages, as Dr. Weixelbaum noted. Yes. So I guess there was more consensus about that amongst experts in the field than I was aware of. So good to have that reinforced. Post-plague expansion of suffrage, post-plague expansion of political rights and economic rights. Interesting. Deaths from COVID pre-vaccine were concentrated amongst the demographics of people who were older and more likely to have retired from the workforce. But post-vaccines, the death rates amongst the elderly have been low because older people have got the message that they need to take action to protect their own lives and are so more likely to be vaccinated and more likely to avoid large indoor settings which are with compromised air quality to a degree. There's obviously going to be significant exceptions, and older people who are such strong Trump supporters that they reject the reality of the pandemic and the different variants altogether and refuse to take any preventative action. But is there enough loss from the workforce to help fuel political and economic improvements now? Bob says, even though a lot was a little over my head, but it gives me a lot to think about. Thank you, Bob. You know, if I have as a guest someone from an academic background, then the lexical density of my conversation is going to go up like that, because lexical density means words that cram in more meaning. So say polysyllabic words that just try and get more done in the space of one word. So we're trying to make references to fancy things we know about using the $5 words we know. They have more precision. They refer to more background and assumed knowledge that we might have encountered in an academic setting. So excuse my indulgence in doing that, but I'm glad that you still were able to enjoy it and to know that it's an artifact of me talking to someone who's got a lot of academic learning and academic background. Oh, someone says, I left the door open for you, Davina. Well, what is that? In what sense did you leave the door open for me? Bob says about his brother that he could never understand it because his wife is Black and so are his 8 children. Well, in terms of social hierarchical thinking, women are often subordinate to men in a patriarchal conception of the world. So for your brother to support a racist, purported billionaire might not have been that tricky because his wife is presumably not challenged, or he didn't marry her in the sense of elevating her to a position of equality with himself. Many men, less enlightened men, may view their wives as subordinate to them to a degree, and so that even having a Black wife doesn't mean you adhere very firmly to principles of racial equality. You can still be happy to have married somebody who you understand to be less worthy than yourself, whether because of their gender or because of their racial background and gender. But yes, to have your own children be the product of a racially integrated marriage, and to support a president who did pay lip service to not being racist. He claimed to not be racist. So for the motivated thinker who wants to deny being racist and who believes perhaps that they are free from racism, they could say, no, Trump's not racist. Show me something he said that's racist or a way he's acted. And if they were prepared to engage with reality and evidence, they would have gone, oh, okay, so there's reporting that he and his father used to rent out apartments, and that the application forms of Black Americans who applied to rent apartments would be marked with the letter C for coloured, and their applications would be put in the bin at the Trump end of the rental process. There's evidence that Trump took out a newspaper ad calling for the execution of the exonerated five young men who were falsely convicted of raping a young female jogger in Central Park. And even when they were found not guilty and released, Donald Trump was still calling for their death. And that's an appeal, a simplistic appeal that works for people who don't question things very thoroughly and who don't engage very profoundly with the idea of systematic racism or institutional racism or bias embedded in the work ethics of some police officers who may be tempted to shape evidence or twist evidence to produce a conviction of a Black person, because even without realizing they're being racist, because it just sits more easily with their bias, with their confirmation bias that a Black person is more likely to have committed a crime and therefore more likely to be guilty. And it's difficult for them to examine their own actions and to understand the biases that motivate their own behavior. So there's a lot of racism that's not conscious in the United States, which is why calling somebody a racist is something we leave to extreme examples, but it behooves all of us to acknowledge that we may be unaware of racist ideas that have permeated our own thinking. And unless we're prepared to keep reading and listening to people of color, to Black people in the United States, then we won't be equipped with the tools or the determination to undo some of those bigoted ideas. Bob wants to know if I'm still on Patreon. I am. I will check it now, because I sometimes don't have the courage to look at it. There we go. I've still got some Patreons. There you go. I have someone who deleted their pledge, which is fair enough because I haven't been working very much for my Patreon. I haven't been broadcasting very often, but I still have $71. Oh, that's Australian dollars. Is that Australian dollars or American dollars? Probably American dollars. I have 11 patrons who still pay me $71 a month, which means I should broadcast at least once a week. I owe it to the people who still support me and who helped motivate me and encourage me through all those years of Trump being in office to continue with my broadcasting efforts, to be a point of contact, because I respond to comments for people who were agitated or worried and who needed encouragement and who needed hope and analysis of why had the current moment come to pass, with the idea that at least trying to understand why would be an exercise that would strengthen our ability and resolve to address it and to fix it. So we did fix it in terms of enough millions. 81 million people voted for Biden and Trump was evicted from office, which was, phew, doesn't have access to the nuclear code, so it was a relief for many of us. But there are still a lot of dangers faced by American democracy that not only pre-existed Trump's appearance on the political scene, but were exacerbated by Trump's creation of a permission structure for Republicans to lie. To lie in ever increasingly bold-faced and detached from reality ways. So Trump emboldened and empowered liars, as well as emboldening and empowering racists. He span a story that has he played word association games with the virus to say China virus, to create hostility towards Asian Americans that has resulted in an increased rate of violent attacks on Asian people in the United States, Asian Americans. He used the power of repetition, and he used the emotional fuel of defiance for people to feel empowered by defying social standards and social expectations, to say we're not being racist, to pair a disease and a racial background together. That's not racist. It is racist. It's not defensible from a perspective of truth telling. It's not that the truth about the origins of the virus doesn't mean you can depict it as an attack from China. To do so, to depict it as an attack from the Chinese government and from the Chinese people, is to motivate violent people to take out their frustrations on people of Asian appearance. And that's what's happened. I think the rate is higher of attacks against Asian women because people are often more emboldened to attack a target they perceive will not be able to physically rebuff an attack. So people are more concerned about attacking a man, but attacks on elderly Asian men, people from Korean, Japanese, Chinese background have all suffered as a consequence of the xenophobic violence that Trump authorized and emboldened with his repeated defiance of civilized standards to call it the COVID pandemic and to not say China virus. Something he knew, and he did it to capitalize on that anti-establishment energy, that the kind of fascistic glee that Freud would have described as Thanatos, or the death wish or the destruction wish, the wish to destroy, to tear down, to vent one's anger and dissatisfaction and grievance. So if you're frustrated with lockdowns and you're already psychologically on the edge and you go out in public and see an Asian person, violence was more likely to ensue. The risk profile of Asian Americans went up considerably in the event of what Trump did, which is use his bully pulpit, his position as the highest authority in the land, the leader of the free world, as it were, to legitimize this approach of this matching of the word China and the word virus. Also, Bob wants to know if I'm still getting payments from my account. So if you're still one of my Patreons, I expect that you are. But I might have to not look at it on my phone. That probably won't give me enough detail. No new patrons in the last 30 days. Well, that's not surprising. So I'll look it up, Bob, and I'll get back to you. But just so if people want to know if they're still my patrons, 11 of you still are, which is incredible. I think I felt too guilty. That's why I couldn't open the Patreon app for a little while, because I knew I wasn't broadcasting as often. But I was hoping that the new year would give me the energy and the commitment to put my face out there again and to say, here I am, trying to take care of my health, trying to take care of my children in a new country, still have a lot to offer because, man, white people, we have some learning to do. And we need to help so that enough people, as Joe Biden said, if enough people care, we can we can organize help for those in need if enough people feel strongly about things. And I do feel that it's been a genocidal attack on Black and Hispanic and Native American people who have been disproportionately, negatively, adversely affected by the pandemic, by COVID. That the fact that it's been disproportionately white people who've refused to consistently wear a mask. It's been disproportionately white Republican people who've refused to get vaccinated. I believe it was down to 60% of Republicans have got 1 dose at least. So a subset of that will be 2-dosed and even boosted. And I hope that that gets politically capitalized on. The frustrations of people with the subset of the American population that is extending the pandemic, making it difficult to bring the pandemic under control, pretending that the choice to get vaccinated is purely an individual risk choice. It's not. You're choosing whether or not to expose your community to greater risk. You're choosing whether or not to expose the hospital system to a greater risk of collapse. You're choosing to take a risk like drink driving and then insist I'm only increasing the risk of myself getting in a crash. Nope, you're increasing the risk that you'll crash into somebody else, infect them, take up a hospital bed that could be used by someone else. Vaccinated people are dying because they can't get medical treatment for conditions as simple as gallbladder, as a gallbladder problem, and all the elective surgery that keeps getting postponed. I saw someone post that people need to understand elective surgery doesn't mean frivolous surgery, it means scheduled surgery. So the people who have scheduled surgery to remove cancers, to remove polyps, to remove vocal nodes, to be relieved from paying to have back surgery, all of those people that are having surgery delayed because of the raging COVID that is being spread predominantly by people who are unvaccinated, because even though vaccinated people can still contract COVID, because the likelihood is increased that you'll have a mild case, the probability is increased that you'll be relatively less infectious. So it is not just a pandemic of the unvaccinated, it's a pandemic driven by the unvaccinated, driven by stubbornness, driven by stubborn adherence to Trump's initial dismissal of COVID as being a democratic and media jointly produced hoax, Trump's dismissal of the need to wear masks, and Trump's initial getting vaccinated in secret rather than getting vaccinated in the open and reassuring his followers that it was an important thing to do. All right. Are there any more messages? No. Okay. Well, thank you to everybody who's been on board listening today. Oh, I'm thirsty. And hope you enjoyed it. I promised in the title that I would discuss Mitch McConnell and the Mitch McConnell and real Americans. So, oh look, and here's a comment from, is this an actor? An actor, satirist, and urban raconteur called George Hahn. And he made the comment, during Biden's first year, information about COVID was pushed everywhere and vaccines were made available everywhere for free. Outside of holding people down and forcibly masking and jabbing them, what more is he supposed to do? Biden isn't failing America. America is failing Biden. So to be more specific, the subset of America that is suffering from oppositional defiance disorder or collective oppositional defiance disorder, COD. It's not a word, but I'm going to make it a thing. And I'll type it up on screen. What did I say? Collective oppositional defiance disorder. Not that I want to medicalize it, I just want to I want people to be able to describe it. I want to be able to tell a story about what is perpetuating the pandemic currently so that people know where to put the blame more appropriately. All right. Moscow Mitch and his minions will continue their obstruction and block yet another essential piece of legislation, voting rights. Indeedy. Oh, update from Texas, which is that 400,000 Texas homes and businesses could lose power next week over a dispute between energy firms. So Texas energy supply is off the grid, independent of the national energy grid, which was a choice by the libertarian-leaning Republicans who falsely characterize any type of nationalized industry as socialism, and therefore make people more vulnerable to profit disputes, to the whims of private enterprise. What else have I saved? Oh, look, somebody has made a meme, a cultural message that puts out Republican fear-mongering messages and also a translation. So the coded message of they want to invade your suburbs, uncoded is they want to desegregate your neighborhood. Coded message, the left wants to bring communism to America. Uncoded, the left wants Americans to enjoy fair wages and guaranteed healthcare like every other developed nation. Well, that's true. You don't need communism to have universal healthcare. You need a tax base and a less privatized system of healthcare, which is less susceptible to the whims of and profiteering of private enterprise. Government is a way to collectivize a funding pool and then have some things that are just guaranteed, some things that are just universally delivered, and become more reliable as a consequence. You don't need communism for that. Communism is the opposite of privatization, is making everything under the control of the state, and universal healthcare is quite distinct from the collectivization of everything. Okay, coded message, they hate the Bible. Uncoded message, they respect other religions and believe in separation of church and state. Coded message, they hate police. Uncoded message, they want to end deadly state violence against unarmed Black people. Coded message, they want to kill babies. Uncoded, they trust women to make ethical decisions about their own reproductive lives and agree with the 50 years of legal precedents that women have that right enshrined in the Constitution, that the implication of the Constitution is that women should have physical autonomy over what happens with their own body. With regard to something as significant as gestating a whole other human being for 9 months, and that women should be the gatekeepers of that decision as to whether or not to proceed with a pregnancy. Coded message, they want to rewrite history. Uncoded message, they want to include voices from history that white historians have ignored. Or yes, they just want to include parts of history that white people often find it inconvenient or embarrassing to acknowledge. That the white people have to push through that awkwardness or those feelings of discomfort because you can't be properly informed about your own country's dynamics if you erase or whitewash your own history. Last, coded message is they hate America, and uncoded is they want America to live up to its principles of liberty and justice for all. That's nice, and that's a lovely thing. I'm glad I was able to share it. Raphael Warnock, the senator for one of the two senators for Georgia, said, despite tonight's vote, we cannot turn away. This will not be the last opportunity we get to fight for voting rights. We will meet the moment again to try again and again until we succeed. And here we have Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Which state is he from? He is from Rhode Island, the ocean state. All right, 38 seconds.
Madam President, this past weekend is our annual reminder as a country of the courage and suffering and sacrifice and passion and love and energy that so many of our fellow Americans put into protecting our democracy. When in a democracy, one group of citizens can deliberately, purposefully make it more difficult for another group of citizens to vote, they have put a dagger into that democracy. We cannot let that happen. Madam President, this past weekend is our annual reminder as a country of the courage and suffering and sacrifice.
Because of Martin Luther King. Yes, it would be nice to build on his legacy. Warnock.
51. But it takes 60 votes to repair the ceiling of our democracy by passing voting rights legislation. I'm left to conclude that if the issue is important enough, the Senate feels compelled to act. Well, let me say that I believe that the democracy is at least as important as the economy. Recently, many of our colleagues have argued that legislation to protect voting rights somehow offends our federal system of government and amounts, they say, to a federal takeover of elections. Some of the same voices, ironically, who have extolled Dr. King's life this week have at the same time been working vigorously against the legislation we're debating today to protect the right to vote. And many of them have been channeling old states' rights arguments. Let the message go out. You cannot remember Martin Luther King Jr. and dismember his legacy at the same time. You can argue whatever side you want, but you do not get to argue both sides. I will not sit quietly while some make Dr. King a victim of identity theft. You do not get to offer praises and plaudits in memory of Dr. King and then marshal the same kinds of states' rights arguments that were used against Dr. King and against the civil rights movement. Please know that as the pastor of Dr. King's church, this argument evokes, I say really respectfully, it evokes some of the darkest moments in our country's long struggle for equality.
Wow, that was very powerful. I'm glad we listened to that together. Everybody's probably listened to this channel for too long. It's definitely been the pro-democracy variety hour today. More that she wrote is an account, Alison Gill. This is the updates with the January 6th fact-finding commission about what happened on that day. And because the Supreme Court has just authorized the National Archivist handing over details, information, documents from when the Trump administration was in office, those have been authorized to hand over things from the National Archives to the January the 6th Commission, which has the bipartisan commission because it has two Republicans, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, on it. Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are both Republican House representatives. Liz Cheney from Wyoming, Adam Kinzinger, I've forgotten. But it make it more difficult for Republicans to deny that there are facts to January the 6th, and they are on the side of fact-finding and not fact-burying. Oh, I haven't listened to this yet. This is Mark Elias. He is a very important lawyer who has been challenging Republican voter suppression laws all across the United States. 20 laws were passed in 2021 that were designed to negatively impact voter turnout, designed to make it more difficult for people to obtain ballots requested online. 50% of new voting applications have been rejected in Texas because of new processes that have been introduced that say if you use one form of ID, say the number from your driver's license when you apply, but then use your social security number at a different time when you're requested for ID, then your ballot is automatically rejected. Just nothing to do to protect voter integrity, everything to do with making obstructions and obstacles. People need to go online and talk about how this harkens back to the day when white people would put these arbitrary rules in place, like making black people count the number of bubbles on a bar of soap, or recite passages of the Constitution from memory in order to allow them to vote. Because research has been done by the Republican Party into what forms of ID are least easy to obtain for people of color, and then made those the required pieces of ID. So for older Americans who were born at a time when hospitals were segregated, and so may not have a government-issued birth certificate because they weren't born in a hospital, they weren't born around the structure of issuing birth certificates. And then particularly if they're rural and you have to catch a bus and change buses and then wait, and then you find out, they'll tell you at the end, oh, you don't have the documentation we want to issue with the birth certificate, or there's some fees associated with this. People get discouraged and give up. So putting more obstacles in the way of Black voters from being able to be Black voters, from being able to produce the ID that Republicans are arbitrarily requiring as part of their strategy to deter Black voters from participating in their own democracy, in order to increase the proportion of vote for Republicans, knowing that Black voters are, in a collective sense, the spine of the Democratic Party. That's one way to get unaccountable politicians, and unaccountable politicians, or politicians who feel unaccountable, who can't be held account by voters because they have restricted some voters. Those politicians are more likely to make decisions against the interests of the people collectively. So allowing or turning a blind eye or being passive in the face of widespread voter suppression targeted towards Black voters is a way to mess up political outcomes for everybody. Let's hear what Mark Ellis has to say. Elias.
If the Republicans want less Mark Elias litigation, engage in less voter suppression. I'll make them a deal. If they stop suppressing the vote, I will stop suing them for suppressing the vote.
Bless him. Bless his heart for suing them for suppressing the vote. He's the lawyer who helped defeat Trump 60 times prior to January the 6th, when all of these cases instigated by Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, were all being brought, often frivolously, but just as part of Trump's storytelling strategy of riling up his voters to say, look, we're trying to get a fair hearing for this reality that the election was, that this theft has occurred, all the while having tried to steal the vote himself by installing an anti-mail post office general, Louis DeJoy, who actively organized the decommissioning of multiple million-dollar mail sorting machines in order to delay the mail and make people's mailed-in ballots more likely to be late and deemed invalid for the election, deemed to have missed cutoff deadlines. That's what Trump tried to orchestrate. People pulled all the stops out to try and fix that process and to try and have mail-in ballots delivered on time, to try and sabotage Louis DeJoy's sabotage campaign. Louis DeJoy is still currently the US Postmaster General because it takes a board to evict him, and Biden still has to find enough board members who are open to the idea of acknowledging what Louis DeJoy did to the American Postal Service and addressing that. So people struggle sometimes to admit mistakes and fix them. That's, I guess, the case with the United States Postal Service Board. Too many people who are in some way grateful to Trump or feel obliged to keep Louis DeJoy in office. Last one.
Supreme Court. And the result is, by this November, if we don't get this changed, I think it's very likely we lose. We could lose 5 members of the Texas Supreme Court who are up. We could lose my position. We could lose governor. It's just a matter of whether it's this time, the next time, or the next time. We're done in Texas if anybody can vote.
Wow, that's pretty revealing, isn't it? If anybody who's qualified, who's allowed to vote, can vote, if they aren't able to suppress the vote, then himself and a lot of other people would be ousted from power. So, of course, he won't admit that that's the substance of what he's just said. He said anybody can vote, but he's going to say anybody like unauthorized people who aren't legal voters. But he, in real terms, actually means legal voters, because when they orchestrate voter suppression policies, it's not to reserve the privilege of voting for American citizens or permanent residents. It is to exclude poor people and disadvantaged people and historically underserved communities from being able to vote. It's a myth that poor people vote for Trump. Actually, people with incomes under $50,000 a year are actually more likely to vote for Democrats. So excluding poor people from voting is one way of increasing the proportion of Republican votes in any given election. Oh, wow, Peloton is halting production of its bikes and treadmills. Interesting. That's all from me today. Thank you so much to everybody who listened. And we'll talk again soon. And if you're white, listen to Black people. Not uniformly. Don't listen to, for example, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. That dude is terrible, and his wife appears to have helped finance the insurrection, has been a signatory to a letter saying that the insurrectionists didn't do any harm and they didn't do anything wrong and they're being unfairly punished and targeted and persecuted. That's Ginny Thomas for you, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who is Black. So Candace Owens, a well-paid contrarian who is revered by people on the right for validating their worst ideas, the most negative, xenophobic, bigoted ideas, generalizing negatively about migrants or Black people or Democrats. And Candace Owen legitimizes all of that and is financially well rewarded for doing so and giving them the veneer of protection that it's these ideas and sentiments are coming from the mouth of a Black woman, proving that they can't possibly be racist, because if they agree with one Black person, then they aren't negatively disposed to Black people in general, except that doesn't prove it at all. Being positively disposed towards one Black person does not in any way serve as proof that overall you are free from racist bias. Anyway, that's all. I've talked long enough. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, everybody, and goodbye.